High above the whispering meadows, where sunflowers drooped and daisies looked desperately thirsty, floated Grumbles. He wasn't like the other clouds. Most clouds drifted, fluffy and white, or swirled with playful breezes, ready to unleash a gentle sprinkle. Grumbles, however, was a stubborn, unchanging patch of dull, dreary gray. He hovered motionlessly, a permanent scowl etched into his cloudy form, looking down at the parched earth with an expression that clearly stated, "Not my problem." "Oh, Grumbles, good morning," chirped a bright, bubbly voice. It belonged to Sunny, a vibrant cloud painted with all the hues of a rainbow. A streak of cheerful yellow here, a swirl of sky blue there. Sunny loved to dance in the sunlight, sending down gentle, refreshing drizzles to the grateful plants below. Isn't it a glorious day? Just perfect for a little refreshment. Sunny winked, letting out a small, happy shower that glistened on the leaves of a wilting rosebush. The rose seemed to sigh in relief, its petals perking up slightly. Grumbles merely huffed, a tiny puff of dry air escaping his side. "Glorious? It's just another Tuesday," he grumbled, his voice like the distant rumble of an old wagon. "And what's with all that dripping? Messy business." "But Grumbles, the flowers are so thirsty." Sunny floated a little closer, his vibrant colors seeming to make Grumbles' gray seem even duller. "Look at poor Petunia down there. Her leaves are practically shriveling. A little rain would make all the difference." Grumbles glanced down, barely sparing a thought for Petunia, who indeed looked quite sad. "She'll be fine." "Truh," he muttered, drifting a millimeter to the left to avoid Sunny's enthusiastic, dewy aura. Nature takes care of itself, always has. "But we're nature too," Sunny insisted, doing a playful little flip that sent a few sparkling droplets cascading. "We clouds help the flowers grow, and the rivers flow, and the puddles happen." He gestured wildly with a fluffy arm. "But we're nature too," Sunny insisted, doing a playful little flip that sent a few sparkling droplets cascading. "We clouds help the flowers grow, and the rivers flow, and the puddles happen." He gestured wildly with a fluffy arm. Grumbles enjoyed being aloof, separate, and most importantly, dry. He prided himself on being the least caring cloud in the entire sky, a title he held with quiet, surly pride. The idea of contributing, of getting involved, simply didn't appeal to him. He preferred his solitary, unchanging existence, far above the messy needs of the world below. Sunny sighed, a puff of lavender mist. This was going to be harder than she thought. Sunny wasn't one to give up, not when there were thirsty sunflowers and wilting dandelions involved. The next morning, she floated over to Grumbles with a determined gleam in her rainbow hues. "Grumbles," she began, "I've been thinking. Maybe you just need a little inspiration." Before Grumbles could grumble back, Sunny began to produce the most ridiculous sound he'd ever heard from a cloud. It was a high-pitched, squeaky sound, like 1,000 tiny rubber duckies gargling in a bathtub. "What in the fluffy heavens is that?" Grumbles demanded, shuddering. "It's my rain song," Sunny proudly declared, her voice warbling off-key. "The ancient clouds used to sing to encourage the sprinkles. Doesn't it make you feel like making a little pitter-patter?" She even attempted a small cloud dance, twirling awkwardly, sending a few accidental drops onto Grumbles' gray surface. Grumbles recoiled as if stung. "Stop it! You're getting me all damp! And that noise, it's utterly dreadful! My purpose is to not make puddles, not listen to squeaky duck concerts." Undeterred, Sunny tried a different tactic. Later that day, she appeared with a tiny, sparkly bucket made of solidified mist. "Look, Grumbles," she whispered conspiratorially. "I've collected the happiest dewdrops from the morning grass. If you just add a few of your own, we could make a super-duper, extra happy puddle for the froggies." She presented the bucket, practically gleaming with enthusiasm. Grumbles peered into the bucket with suspicion. "Dewdrops? Sounds like sticky work. And froggies? I don't know any froggies. Why should I care about their puddles?" He nudged the bucket away with a misty elbow, causing the sparkly dewdrops to slosh precariously. Sunny sighed, but a new idea sparked in her sunny core. The following afternoon, she gathered a small cloud audience, a few fluffy white cloudlets, and even a curious wispy cirrus cloud. "Friends," Sunny announced dramatically, "Grumbles is going to demonstrate his incredible rain-making avoidance skills. Watch as he resists the urge to water the driest patch of earth." She pointed dramatically to a particularly sad-looking patch of brown, cracked earth below. Grumbles, for a fleeting moment, looked almost flattered by the attention. He puffed out his chest a tiny bit. "See?" he boomed, trying to sound nonchalant. "Not a drop. Pure, unadulterated dryness. It's a talent, really." But as the cloudlets oohed and awed at his stoicism, Grumbles suddenly felt a strange sensation, a tiny tickle deep inside his gray form. He squashed it down immediately. He wouldn't give in. Not for silly songs or sparkly buckets or even a tiny audience. He was Grumbles, the cloud who couldn't care less, and he was determined to stay that way. Sunny, despite her various attempts, was still met with a stone-cold, or rather cloud-dry, refusal. Days turned into a week, and the whispering meadows grew quieter and browner. The sunflowers, once proud and tall, hung their heads so low, their faces were almost touching the dusty ground. Petunia, the rosebush, looked less like a rose and more like a bundle of dry twigs. Even the usually bouncy froggies had stopped their cheerful croaking. Their favorite mud puddle, nothing but a cracked, parched circle in the earth. The air felt heavy, not with the promise of rain, but with a palpable sense of longing. Grumbles, still hovering stubbornly gray, tried to ignore it all. He squinted at the parched land. "Bit crispy down there, isn't it?" he muttered to himself, trying to sound indifferent. But even he couldn't deny the silence. No buzzing bees, no chirping crickets, just the occasional mournful whisper of the dry wind. Sunny floated over, her usual vibrant colors muted by a touch of sadness. "Grumbles," she said, her voice soft and serious. "It's getting really bad. The little acorn tree, its leaves are turning yellow. And Mrs. Bumble, the bee, told me her honey flowers aren't blooming without water. Soon, there won't be any honey." Grumbles actually flinched. "Honey? That sounded important." But he quickly recovered. "That's unfortunate for Mrs. Bumble," he declared, trying to sound nonchalant. "But I'm a cloud, not a honey dispenser." Sunny didn't argue or try a silly trick this time. Instead, she gently nudged Grumbles towards a specific spot below. "Look, Grumbles," she urged. "Really look." Below them, a tiny, determined sprout, no bigger than Sunny's smallest dewdrop, was valiantly trying to push through the dry earth. It swayed weakly, its tiny green tips struggling against the hardness. Nearby, a little ladybug scurried past, looking desperate for a sip of water. Grumbles peered down. He saw the struggling sprout. He saw the ladybug. For the first time, not as a messy inconvenience, but as something vulnerable. A tiny flicker, like a faraway spark, lit up inside his gray cloud heart. He quickly dismissed it. "It's just a plant," he mumbled, trying to sound dismissive. "And a bug. They're always doing bug things." But the image of the struggling sprout and the thirsty ladybug seemed to stick, like a stubborn burr, in Grumbles' mind. He even caught himself imagining what it would feel like to be that tiny sprout, longing for just one drop. Sunny, noticing the change in his usually unchanging expression, decided on a quieter approach. She simply waited, letting the parched earth and the silent suffering speak for themselves. The sky, usually a canvas for joyful cloud play, now felt hushed, waiting. The next day, the air felt thick and still. Even Sunny seemed quieter, her vibrant colors a little less bright. Grumbles, despite himself, found his gaze drifting down to the parched earth, specifically to the tiny, struggling sprout. He huffed. "Silly plant," he mumbled. "Why doesn't it just give up?" Just then, a small, fluffy cloudlet, barely bigger than a sheep, zipped past Grumbles, giggling. It was Cloudlet Pip, known for his playful antics. As Pip zoomed by, he accidentally bumped into Grumbles. Bump! Grumbles, caught off guard, wobbled slightly. A tiny, almost imperceptible drip escaped from his gray underside. It was so small, he almost didn't notice. But then another and another, a few solitary, shiny drops, like tears of liquid silver, fell from Grumbles. One of these drops landed directly on the tiny sprout below. The sprout, which had been drooping, seemed to perk up ever so slightly. A single, brave green leaf unfolded a tiny bit more. Another drop landed on the desperate ladybug, who paused, took a quick sip, and then scurried on with renewed energy. Grumbles watched, wide-eyed. He hadn't meant to do that. It was an accident. He quickly tried to suck the drops back up, but it was too late. He felt something. Not grumpiness, not annoyance. It was a strange, warm flutter, like a tiny butterfly had hatched inside his cloudy core. Sunny, who had seen the whole thing, floated closer, a small smile playing on her misty lips. She didn't say, "I told you so." Instead, she simply pointed. "Look, Grumbles," she whispered. Below them, around the area where Grumbles' accidental drops had fallen, a tiny patch of earth was now just a little less dusty. And there, reflecting the sunlight like a miniature diamond, was the smallest puddle Grumbles had ever seen. The ladybug returned, circling it excitedly, and even a tiny ant crawled over for a drink. The sprout looked visibly happier. Grumbles stared at the minuscule puddle. It wasn't much, certainly not enough to save the whispering meadows, but it was his puddle. and it had made a difference. He felt that strange, warm flutter again, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It wasn't heavy or inconvenient. It felt light, almost pleasant. He tried to look grumpy again, to dismiss the feeling, but a tiny, almost invisible curve appeared at the corner of his misty mouth. The idea of contributing, which he had so vehemently rejected, had just shown him a glimpse of a different kind of feeling, one that wasn't gray at all. The tiny puddle Grumbles had accidentally made seemed to shimmer with a secret message. He couldn't shake the warm, fluttery feeling it had given him. He watched the little sprout, now standing a little straighter, and the ladybug, now looking for more water. A thought, completely new and startling, bloomed in his cloudy mind. What if I made more puddles? Bigger puddles? Suddenly, a gust of wind carried a faint whisper up to him. It was Petunia the rosebush, her voice barely a rustle. Oh, if only. Just one more drop. Grumbles looked at Petunia, then at the sad sunflowers, and finally at the cracked earth where the froggies used to play. The warmth in his core began to grow, spreading through his gray form. It wasn't just a flicker now. It was a gentle, steady glow. He looked at Sunny, who was watching him with a hopeful, knowing smile. Taking a deep breath, Grumbles did something he hadn't done in ages. He focused. He thought of the thirsty roots, of the dry leaves, of the parched ground begging for moisture. He pictured the froggies doing their happy puddle dances, and as he thought of them, a strange sensation started. His gray color began to lighten, just a little. A pale, almost translucent sheen appeared. Then a tiny, tentative sprinkle started. It wasn't a grumble. It was a gentle pitter-patter, soft and steady. The first drops hit the dusty ground, raising tiny clouds of delightful scent. Sunny gasped, her colors flaring with joy. "He's doing it!" she chirped, spinning in delight. Grumbles kept focusing. The worn feeling grew stronger, pushing away the grumpiness he'd held onto for so long. He imagined the little sprout drinking, the flowers raising their heads, the rivers beginning to trickle. And as his imagination soared, so did his generosity. The pitter-patter turned into a steady, refreshing rain. Not a downpour, but a consistent, joyful shower. The dry earth soaked it up greedily. Petunia's leaves unfolded, glistening. The sunflowers slowly began to lift their heavy heads, their yellow faces turning towards the sky in thanks. And from below, a chorus of happy ribbits erupted as the froggies discovered their puddle was not only back, but growing. Grumbles watched it all, a true smile finally gracing his misty face. His gray had softened, touched with hints of pale blue and even a faint rosy glow from within. The brightest sunshine Sunny had spoken of wasn't just in the sky. It was blooming right inside him. He felt lighter, happier, and surprisingly, very content. He hadn't just watered the plants, he had watered his own heart. The grumpy gray cloud, who couldn't care less, had found his true purpose, and it felt brighter than any sunshine.